Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Communicate Soul to Soul with the Spirit World, the key to accessing your innate mediumship skills and a life of love and joy. My name is Stephen Dine. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm thrilled because we get to be exploring the frontiers of communication that are possible, really, with discarnate spirits, friends, allies, loved ones on the other side, with one of the most wonderful pioneers of this arena. Her name is Suzanne Giesemann. She's a mystic, medium, and author. She's also got a very fascinating background in the military that we'll hear a little bit more about today. And I think more than any single person in the Shift Network, she's really opened up the paradigm of the possible for us in terms of this communication and the transformational value of it. We ourselves in our family experienced some of the magic of this, communicating with my wife's deceased father. That was very powerful for the whole family, very healing. We're going to hear about some other ways that you can build bridges of communication and how the benefits that that can bring as well. So Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us here today.
You're welcome, Stephen. It's always a joy to talk with you and everybody.
Great. Well, we're going to dive in, and I know you've got some cool new things to share with us today. And I also want to let people know that we're going to have a program coming up with Suzanne where you can take this work to the next level and really make it your own and build the practices. It's called Expand Your Innate Mediumship Skills with Soul-to-Soul Communication. We'll share a little bit more about that towards the end of the hour. So Suzanne, I know you've done a few of these events with us, but for the benefit of those who have not seen you before, I think it'd be great to start with a little bit of your personal backstory and what brought you to mediumship, since it was a rather unusual career path that brought you here, and then we can go into some of the teachings that you want to share today.
Yes, indeed. I know that it was part of my path to have a very left brain background in a career that nobody would ever imagine I would one day be working as a medium, especially me, because Stephen, I'm not what people consider a born medium. I don't have that history of having seen spirits when I was 5 years old and turned it off. I never turned it on until later in my life. I spent 20 years as a naval officer, and I rose to the rank of commander, and along the way hit all those Navy milestones of being a commanding officer, and then really some great jobs near the end of my career, serving as a personal assistant to the head of the Navy, the chief of naval operations, and then ultimately as the aide, the right-hand aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's the head of the whole U.S. military. So I've met with 6 presidents. I've met with kings and queens, flown around the world, been on Air Force One. And if anybody had told me that your next career is going to be talking to dead people, I would have thought they were crazy. In fact, they would have yanked my security clearance pretty quickly after that. But, you know, life throws us some curveballs. And the thing is, Stephen, many of those curveballs are not exactly pleasant. And that's where my life took a big turn when my stepdaughter, Susan, who was also had a military career, she was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, was crossing the flight line at work, and out of the blue was struck by lightning and killed. And she was 6 months pregnant with our only grandchild. So talk about starting to ask those deep life questions that we all eventually ask. I kept asking and not getting the answers I wanted until I went into meditation, and that just opened everything for me. I ultimately did connect with Susan, and then discovered I could connect with other people's loved ones very clearly. And it's that left brain background of mine that insisted, if I'm going to connect with you across the veil, you need to prove to me it's you. You need to give me evidence. And that's what I get every time I connect. And that's what changes people's hearts and minds.
Let's talk a little bit more about that evidence, that really clarifying, since so many of the messages that we often hear about mediumship are more kind of reassuring, emotional reassurance, and less of like, you know, establishing facts on the ground kind of thing. But you really put a lot of focus on that. And so let's first share a little bit why it's so important to establish that evidence that appeals more to the left brain before even going into some of the other emotional or healing pieces.
Well, it's not important for everybody. There are some people that just know there's a spirit world and they trust whatever anybody tells them. But that wasn't me, and that wasn't my husband. And when I took my husband to a medium before I knew I would be one to see if she could connect with my stepdaughter, I didn't tell her anything about us because I didn't trust. And if she had not given us irrefutable evidence that she was talking to Susan, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. evidence is a game changer. And in your reading, I brought through things that you didn't even know were accurate until you shared your reading with family members. And they said, oh yeah, but how did you know that? It's because your dad was right there talking to us. And the evidence just takes away that little bit of a doubt that says, could that person have been making it up? Or afterwards, people are so excited in a reading and they think, that was my loved one. And then the doubt creeps in, and other family members who are not believers say, oh, they could have been making that up. But you go back and you show them that evidence, and it just takes away that doubt. And those across the veil want us to know we are here, and they are happy to give us evidence because they want us to know that they haven't really died.
You know, one family member, when you're referencing that evidence, said he was floored by the whole thing, and there was just no way that it could not be a spirit, the spirit of Larry speaking through from the other side. And the use of the term floored was interesting because so much we kind of build up this ego structure and identity and belief systems, and so flooring is sort of like a humbling. It's like sort of pancaking out your usual belief systems, and that just like opens us to the grace that can move through. So maybe share just a few examples of how you are able to get the kind of evidence that is incontrovertible, that really doesn't, you know, that you just can't even question once you've received it.
Well, this is something that I learned from my original mentor, Janet Nohavik, who's now across the veil. When I learned from her that you can develop systems to use with the spirit world so that you can actually appreciate and use your left brain in conjunction with the flowing openness of the right brain to say to the spirit world, okay, every time I sit with you, these are the kinds of things I want you to show me. And how about we use some symbols that you can replicate each time to make the communication easier? And how about I have certain routines that I go through to ensure that I'm in the best possible state of awareness for connecting with you? These systems help us in our human side to sit down and trust that when we use these systems, we're going to get the results that we want. And it's just stunning how reliable they are, because the spirit world, the non-physical world, is right here and is very much, those in it very much want to interact with us. So the more we can do to make that easy for them, the better the communication is.
One thing I've heard you do in the reading with us, and I know you do elsewhere, is just that you have a practice of just saying whatever's coming, even if it sounds a little out there or weird. Maybe share a little bit more about why some of the evidence might just be very out of left field.
This is one of the key ways that we know we're not making things up. The challenge when you talk to other people's loved ones across the veil is the words and thoughts that they send to us come through sounding just like our own thoughts. So people who are new to this often say, well, how do I know I'm not just making it up? So those across the veil will send us things that stand out from our own thoughts. So I actually look for those things that sound bizarre, that make me feel like, oh, they're going to laugh at me if I say these things, but they are often really what I call the gold nuggets, the pieces that make the person say, oh my God, that's my loved one. And that's the goal anytime we connect across the veil. So I have trained myself to not be worried about getting a no, not worrying about if people laugh at me. And in fact, some of the very first things that I see in a reading are images that just pop out, and I say it immediately, and it shocks the person, my sitter, my client, and they know exactly what it is, and I know we're off and running.
Well, let's back up a little bit and look at the process of how you start to open that communication channel, because you said, you know, in the previous incarnation, you were not getting these kind of messages in a regular way. So how did you start to train yourself to really key in with the frequencies and the communication that can cross across the veil?
And I'm glad you used that word train, Stephen, because that's exactly what it takes. But I didn't know I was training myself. When my stepdaughter passed, my number one intention was to connect with her. This was in 2006, before meditation was mainstream. But I said to my husband, I'm going to connect with Susan. I know she has to still exist. So I'm going to meditate every day. Now, there's probably that military discipline, right? But I tell people who say I'm not disciplined, how about we use the word commitment? Are you committed to connect with your loved ones have passed? Do you have a strong commitment and dedication to connect with angels and guides? Then sit regularly and create space in awareness in the mind so that when those across the veil put something in your mind, you notice it standing out. So the training for me was sitting daily saying, Susan, are you here? Susan, I want to see you. Susan, come to me. And that was my sole focus. There's a double entendre there, if you ever heard one. But because I had that sole focus, I blocked out everything else and started to notice what was arising in the silence. It was a training that is ongoing because the outer world distracts us all the time. It's so easy to get sucked into the drama of being human, and we need a practice to set that aside, to learn to ignore distractions and open to what's already here at a higher level.
You know, so one thing I've heard you say is that we, when we're communicating with souls on the other side, we have to communicate from our soul. So it's sort of, we have to sort of decenter from our personality and our everyday self in order to even open that channel. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that?
Right. And that was the second part of the question you asked earlier. This is so important to realize that the spirit world needs us to put forth the highest possible vibration that we can. So when we're not connecting, we're working on ourselves and finding those dense energies within ourselves. Maybe every time we snap at someone, we say, whoa, what caused that? That's not aligned with my soul. So that's an ongoing practice that benefits us throughout our lives. But when we sit to communicate with those across the veil at any level, we want to be sending them loving energy, excitement, every possible bright light that we can so that they can connect with us more easily.
It's beautiful. And is it harder to do this kind of work when you have a deep relationship, like when it's your stepdaughter or somebody else? Is it actually harder because you have more noise and ideas and other things going on, or is it easier?
I believe that the only thing that gets in the way is the belief that it's harder, Stephen, because when Susan finally did come through to me, it was her voice, and that made it easier. I didn't have any doubt that it was her. I didn't think for a moment, this is my imagination, because it's very hard to recreate a loved one's voice in your mind. Even if you just saw them that morning, there's something about the way the brain works. But when you hear that voice, you know it, and that was Susan. So also the belief that, oh, I know everything about my loved one can get in the way. And that's not true either. I remember doing a reading for my mother and finding out things about my grandparents that I had no idea when they came through to me. So there are always things that we can find out from our own family members that surprise us. But we don't always have to have evidence from our loved ones either, Stephen. They may just want to communicate and say hi and tell you what they've been doing across the veil.
Mm-hmm. How do you work with, so there's your own practice of attuning and raising your own frequency and beginning to get information and discern. How do you actually work with the sitter or the client that you're working with?
That's a matter of making them comfortable, putting them at ease, and sharing with them the importance of an open heart and an open mind and keeping their vibration high. That's challenging when we're doing mediumship for people who are deep in grief. I used to think that it got in the way if they were deeply in grief, but it doesn't. We're the ones that can overcome that with our love. So we just tell them, I acknowledge that you're hurting. Just do your best to think loving thoughts, and that'll be good enough.
So let's take us through a little bit of like how things like a typical session might unfold then, is like in terms of, you know, really establishing the relationship and the rapport and then making the connection. And how do you approach sort of the unfolding of this over time?
Well, I give my clients a read ahead because I know they want to connect across the veil. They don't want to spend the whole time chit-chatting with me. So I, ahead of time, let them know what to expect and how I'm going to work. And I try to keep that opening conversation to 5 minutes or less. but making sure that they're at ease and telling them how much feedback I want from them. That's really important because I don't want my clients to tell me more than those across the veil are telling us. And some people are really tight-lipped, Stephen. It's funny. They're like, yes, no, to whatever you say. And other people want to tell you all about that person. And I have to stop them and say, that's beautiful, but let's let them tell me that. And just validate what's already come through. It's interesting, Stephen, because I try to tell my clients, they are part of this as well. If you sit there like a rock, you're actually blocking the flow of energy. It's a dance between me and those in spirit and the client, but we just don't want that client to give anything away. So it's kind of fun, actually, because every reading is different. So we do that 5-minute intro, and then we do a brief centering practice to create a field of just those present in spirit and the sitter and I and our guides, so that we block out those distractions and we set a very clear intention. This is who we want to connect with, and a very clear intention of why. And it's always for the client's greatest and highest good and to serve those across the veil. So with that having been done, then I simply go through very briefly. I mean, I've already done the preliminary work before the reading of opening myself, but just a quick shifting of consciousness, which is what I teach in all my classes. And then I just become aware of who's here and share that with the client.
So you mentioned guides, and I think that would be an interesting thing to illuminate a bit more around, is like, how are you working with guides in this process to make connections, give advice, that sort of thing?
It goes two ways. If I'm bringing through a loved one across the veil for my client, my guides, I have one guide, Brenda, who helps me with all my readings, and she knows, she stays in the background. Her job is to take the spirits into what I call the green room before the reading and say, look, you're having a reading with Suzanne. This is how she likes to work. You really need to give her good evidence. And you're going to use these symbols. Like, for example, I see you were a doctor. So you're going to want to show her a caduceus, and she'll know right away you were a doctor. And be sure you tell her a current event, that kind of thing. So that when the reading starts, Brenda steps back, the spirits come in just the order that's perfect for that particular reading. And if I get stuck at all, occasionally I'll say, Brenda, what do I need to see here that I'm not seeing? And she will step in. But I teach people that we want that direct connection with the spirits, not through the guide. However, if my client wants guidance on their life, surely as a medium, any medium can tune in cyclically to the client's energy field. But it's much better when we can tune into the client's guides themselves, because they have the bigger picture than even what's just in their field. So if a client says, can you tell me, what's coming down the pike for me, or I'm dealing with a tough issue, they don't even need to tell me what the issue is. I just, with that intention, suddenly sense their guides. And usually I'm putting my hand up here because they always come in a certain spot for me. And they'll tell me what the issue is and give some advice. It's really stunning how it works, because when a client will say, that's exactly the issue.
It's a really fascinating, complex dance between all these different beings, you and the sitter and guides you have on the other side, and the guides they have. So how do you differentiate between your own higher guidance, your own higher self guidance, versus differentiation with actual separate beings?
This is part of the teaching that I give in all my classes, that ultimately there is only one higher self with a capital S. So does it matter where the guidance is coming from? I don't get hung up on that. As long as it's helpful and healing to the client, that's what matters. But I know from dealing with my own guides, when they're talking to me, if it's not my own guides, I sense them in a different position. And sometimes there's just a knowing. And that, of course, is coming from the highest self.
What sort of gives a little window into like why working with our own belief systems about what reality even is really important. So can you maybe share a little bit about how the path of mediumship requires you to up-level your story over time of who you are and why we're even here?
Oh, absolutely, Stephen, because our own, I call it our BS, our belief system definitely will filter what comes through from spirit. And I've heard a lot of stories of mediums who have actually done harm to their clients because of their BS. And that's my number one rule. is do no harm to the client. So there are some people who have learned things from other humans that just aren't true about the spirit world. And when we can get through our belief system and go with the personal experience of connecting with those across the veil, for example, those who have taken their own lives, they're not burning in hell. I have not experienced a single person across the veil who took their life who was in any place less than surrounded with love. Somebody recently told me it was irresponsible to say that, because now we all want to be there, right? But there is this part of us, the soul, that keeps us here. We came here to fulfill the experience of being human. And we know there's a reason for us being here. But this is a life of goodness. We are part of a benevolent universe. At the deepest level, we don't see that in our headlines, but at the deepest level, there is goodness. And those who pass by taking their own lives come through to say that they realize that it would have been better to stick around longer, but that they're able to receive help across the veil. So that's just one example why we don't want to bring our own stuff into a reading.
Makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense why then you stick really close to whatever you're seeing rather than your interpretation of it. You're just stick to what's being revealed and let the client interpret as well.
That is so true. You just brought to mind an example I had of why I do exactly what you said, Stephen. I report objectively what I'm seeing, and then I'll interpret it because I may be interpreting it according to my own filters. But the client will know based on what I objectively saw. The one where I saw there was great potential for doing harm was when I brought through a woman's father, and I said, he's showing me him and you as a little girl. You look like around 6 years old, and he has you by the hand, and he's taking you into a closet in your home. And I stopped there because I knew now I'm going to interpretation, and anybody could imagine, oh, that doesn't sound good, right? But I stopped because it had a good feeling with it, which was unusual. And the client said, oh, yes, one of my favorite memories as a child was my father taking me into the dark room and letting me watch him develop his photos. Oh, my gosh. So if you can see, if I hadn't reported what I'd seen, some mediums might have said, oh, your father's showing me that he abused you. And now you've opened up a whole can of worms. So there's a responsibility that comes with this work of reporting objectively, tuning in and making sure you're not going through filters.
I know you wanted to also bring in some information around shape shifting, or the way merging with other energy fields. And it's really interesting, like to just share a little bit more about that and how you can use that as a way to really get clear readings.
When we realize that we are all this awareness expressing itself through human forms, that same awareness expresses itself through animals and plants and trees. And it's really fun practice to go back to ground zero, to just be pure awareness and then experience what it's like to be any other creation. This is really helpful in mediumship, for example, when we bring through pets, because we can share the awareness of a pet and share what it experienced as the pet of our client and bring through their feelings as well. So when we realize we're not only human, that opens up literally a world of possibilities to us.
Cool. Well, I know that you also want to go a little further into some of the different kinds of soul-to-soul communication, and just to paint us a little bit of a picture of the landscape that can open up as you evolve this work.
It's stunning, Stephen, because as I said, when I started down this path, my whole intention was only to connect with Susan. And then I studied with traditional mediums, Janet Nohavec and Mavis Patillo, who were all about, one-on-one readings and gallery readings with loved ones who had passed. But through my own meditative practice, I was encountering other beings, angels, archangels, with evidence that is undeniable, took away any doubt in my mind that angels are real, that we can communicate with archangels. I was communicating with some of the ascended masters, with Jesus, who did not mind when I asked for evidence. Show me that I'm not making this up, even though I could feel this powerful presence and love that so eclipsed anything I'd ever experienced in human form. And then I even communicated with a mythological figure named Odin, who gave me evidence about his story. So archetypal figures are all expressions of consciousness. I've communicated with famous people when it served the greater good, not when it serves the ego. So I know that all of this communication takes place from the soul, and we're communicating with other souls. What is the soul? Expanded awareness versus the limited awareness of the human being. So from that expanded state, the sky's the limit, and it's fun and it's enlightening, and it opens us up to, just as you said, greater joy, greater wonder in this world. And when we can bring that back into this world and tell people this world is not all there is, it brings peace as well.
It's remarkable. I'm curious what kind of evidence you even ask for if you're trying to validate that you're really talking to an angel and archangel, because they wouldn't necessarily have the same personal backstory as a beloved family member that you can reference. Oh, the cherry lifesavers, or something like that.
Well, my greatest example is in one of my favorite YouTube videos, Archangel Michael is Real, how he came to me unexpectedly. And I didn't even know about the archangels at that time, and showed me which one he was. Now, anybody watching the show would probably laugh at me. I was so ignorant of the archangels, but my military background, we just didn't go into that. And he started talking to me about Hebrews and gave me a Bible quote. And half an hour later, I'm on a trail and I encounter Hebrew speaking people on a trail. And the coincidences that came through from what he had just shared with me were undeniable, that was an actual encounter with him. But the evidence was great, but the teaching he brought through was life-changing for me. So they don't just come through to give us wows. They come through for a purpose. And in my case, it was teaching me how to better connect.
So let's talk a little about what to do with the information and guidance you receive once things are established like this. So how do you really turn it into action and meaningful change?
It goes right back to every one of us who has said, why didn't I listen to my intuition? Those across the veil do have the higher perspective. So when somebody shows you something that could make your life easier, when we don't act on it, that's kind of foolish. Never act on anything that is at all could be harmful or makes you fearful. Act on those things that sound and feel beneficial, that your heart just knows this is going to be the right thing. And the more you act on it and you see that it's helpful, you learn to listen.
In some fields, like in shamanism, they talk some about less evolved entities or energies and beings on the other side. Do you ever find that factors into reading?
Truly, what Kennedy said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. You will draw to yourself what you need to work through for your soul's progress. So if you're afraid of something, if something shows up and it's fearful, look at it and it will flow right through you. All fear is transitory, and it's simply our fear of examining it that brings it to us. Any lower energy that comes through in a reading that is uncomfortable, we simply assert the spiritual law of personal responsibility and say, I am the light. You must go away. And see, I feel that I radiate that awareness anyway, and so that kind of experience doesn't happen to me. My guides gave me the experience of a panic attack in the middle of the night just because. And I remember crying out to them and saying, what is going on here? It wasn't a being, it was just fear. And they said, just look at it, watch it, be curious. And it flowed right through me. So I'm speaking from the personal experience there, and I'm grateful for that lesson. But strictly by turning up our light, the darkness doesn't have a chance.
I'd love for you to guide us in some sort of a practice today, particularly to just start to crack open the door for some of the soul-to-soul communication that we've discussed, and how you might go about that.
Sure. And this is a new acronym that my guides gave me relatively recently. And anybody who studies with me knows that I love my acronyms. They make it easier to remember processes and rituals. And this one is very simple. We'll just call it an aha moment. And these are moments that I really invite people to do multiple times a day, because it helps us remember that we are connected all the time with our guides and with those in the spirit world. So when you're feeling a little off balance, or you want guidance from those in spirit, you can stop and do this aha moment. So why doesn't everybody just set aside, put down your phone, or set aside whatever you're doing right now, and we'll just take a minute to have an aha moment, where the first A stands for align. So just allow your eyes to close for a moment, and we align with our true nature through the breath. A very simple breathing technique where we breathe in slowly through the nose to the count of 4. So do that with me, please. And exhale slowly to the count of 6 through lightly pursed lips. And picture a shaft of white light as you are aligning, literally coming into alignment with the heavens above and the center of the earth, grounding into the center. Let's take another breath, breathing in from above and below, aligning with this main shaft of light that connects you with all that is. So now aligned and more aware of yourself as a soul, the H in AHA stands for harmonize. This is where we give our energy to the spirit world so that they can connect with us. And so a beautiful way to think about how to send that kind of good, harmonious energy to the spirit world is, imagine it's your first day at work. How do you feel as you approach your new boss? How do you want to let them feel you? You want to send out eagerness, a nice light energy. Just open your heart and radiate your excitement for being present here with the spirit world. Send them your love, your eagerness to communicate with them, and your gratitude for this opportunity. Feel that gratitude in your heart and send it out in all directions. By harmonizing your energy field in this way, you are literally turning up your light and making yourself much more easy to connect with from those in the spirit world. And it's that simple to align and harmonize. And now the final ah in this very brief aha moment, the final A is attune. And we attune to higher consciousness by simply talking to them from this higher state. So you can say, hello, my guides. I want to acknowledge that you're part of my life. I'm so grateful for you. And now as I shift my focus to you here now with me, what guidance and advice do you have for me now? Ask that now and simply sit for a moment and listen. And that's all the time it takes to receive an image or a thought that just arises and stands out from your normal thoughts that are always going around in your head. But because you took the time to align, to harmonize, and attune, addressing your guides or any loved one across the veil directly like that, the insight you receive will be exactly what you needed to hear. You can open your eyes and take in a nice, refreshing breath, give thanks for what you heard, and now act on what you heard. So an aha moment, imagine if we did that throughout our day. It's very simple. You can do it anytime, anywhere, and you'll start getting guidance that's helpful and see that your life is flowing more beautiful and freely as a result.
Do you find it's helpful to keep a journal of those aha moments, so you're kind of keeping track of them as you go, or just put them into action right away? And
if I were to print out the files that I have of the results of doing these kinds of practice, Stephen, I'd have to buy a couple reams of paper, I think. Yeah, I document everything, because that human side at first will say, oh, I'm making that up, or that synchronicity was just a coincidence. But when you amass all of these signs and synchronicities, there's no denying that we're connecting with spirit.
That's beautiful. Well, I know you've have so many great examples and stories, and I'd love for you to share some. Just really give us a sense of what's possible. It really helps to motivate us, and it's powerful to just hear as well.
Well, it's interesting you asked that because I just got an email the other day that I printed out because I wanted to share it with anybody who's thinking about going down the path of learning how to connect with higher consciousness. It was from a woman who's taken 2 of my Shift Network classes, Stephen. Do you mind if I read it for you?
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, let's do it.
It's very powerful. She said, "Wow, did my life turn around after taking these classes? My focus flipped in a moment from wanting to take my own life to wanting to explore and expand my knowledge and squeeze every ounce out of this amazing gift of living and learning. Since following you and taking your courses, I've discovered a way of being that brings so much happiness. You have a wonderful way of transferring knowledge in a way that my left brain could understand. My right brain thanks you, LOL." And then she said, "I'm able to connect daily to my husband who passed in 2021. And I'm also able to connect with many other souls. Amazing and surprising experiences happen to me every day. I'm so grateful for all of this. Knowing that we are never alone has been a real game changer for me. I'll continue to spread this wonderful knowing to others whenever and wherever I can. How lucky and blessed are we?" And Stephen, I hear all the time that learning to connect across the veil saves lives. It's not an exaggeration. People are in a desperate place when they have someone who has passed. Doesn't matter what the relationship is, a child, a parent, a spouse, a friend, a sibling. And to come and discover that there is something so much more and that any of us can learn to connect. We've been talking about mediumship here as a profession, like I do, but having not seen souls my whole life, I absolutely know that because this is soul to soul communication and we are all souls, all of us can learn to have at least a rudimentary connection with any level across the veil.
Hmm. There's a beautiful, beautiful letter and testimonial. And I wonder if you can share a little bit more about just once you're in a session and you've established like that relationship, sort of like, how do you start to really find and work with all the places that can be healed? Because a lot of times I know that the spirits and we gravitate towards things that are incomplete or unsaid, but just to really approach it in this kind of healing, transformational way.
It's interesting that you asked that question, Stephen, because I might have asked it in the beginning as well, thinking that we have to do everything. We simply hold that intention that I shared earlier, that whatever happens is in the sitter, the client's greatest and highest good. Those across the veil know exactly what the client needs to hear. So I don't have to say what's going to be most healing. Where do we go next? You just flow with the spirits. And it's really interesting because I ask my clients always, what's your intention? And they may say, well, it's to hear from a child. And then in comes a parent. In the beginning, as a baby medium, I might have said, oh, thank you, Mom, but they want to hear from their child. Now I know if that parent shows up, there's a reason. And indeed, there will usually be a big apology, an explanation, asking for forgiveness, some great big healing opportunity. And then when that's done, well, lo and behold, here's the child who passed. So we have to learn to trust spirit, again, those with the bigger picture.
Kind of leads into a question that just be about like your understanding at this point, having done so many sessions and trained, really thousands of people in this work. Like, how do you really see those kind of lineages of family patterns now that we are all, we all have stuff that we're working through in our family lineages, but like, how do you understand it from the big picture now?
Oh, what I see is they really are patterns, and the similarities, you see it over and over and over. We all deal with the same issues. We all have the same dramas, just plays out in different roles. And so it all comes back to, say what you need to say now before you need to find a medium to say it from across the veil. Because it's all about love. We come into these relationships to learn to dance with each other. And that's why reading is like a dance. We just flow with what comes through.
That's so beautifully said. Well, Suzanne, you're so inspiring and always just really opens my mind and heart to talk with you. So I want to spend some time now talking about your program that's coming up, which we're super excited about. So Suzanne's going to be teaching expand your innate mediumship skills with soul-to-soul communication. Connect with multiple realms and spirit beings through the field of oneness, love, and joy. You can see it laid out in detail at the URL soulmediumshipcourse.com, soulmediumshipcourse.com. It's actually an 8-week program, a little longer than normal. And that's because there's just a lot of great, valuable content that Suzanne's going to be taking you through if you choose to join. So Suzanne, I'd love for you to share a little bit about this program and how it's different than some of the other work that you teach. And then we'll go through the modules and you can give us a preview of what's coming in each.
Well, Stephen, I think you might know that because it's on the course page, that this is actually a bringing back around a course that I taught before. In fact, it was the most popular course the Shift Network has ever taught. So I'm excited to teach it again. But even though it's some of the same material, I am always evolving. The students are evolving. There always is new information. In fact, I got a new acronym even this morning that I'm going to put into this course. So I'll always have new examples, new videos to share. But I love this course because it's for anybody. It can help those who are already mediums, those who want to be professional mediums, but it is aimed especially for anybody who wants to learn to connect at any level across the veil. So we're talking about loved ones who have passed, pets, angels, guides, everyone we've talked about in this session here, famous people, archetypal figures. The practice of connecting with them is the same. So we're going to dive into what makes it possible and how to do it, and actually task the participants to make those kinds of connections.
Module 1, embracing all souls' interconnectedness so you can use soul-to-soul communication in service to yourself and others, an overview of mediumship.
Well, it's really important to understand what makes mediumship and this connection possible. So we have to lay a very strong foundation in this opening module. And I discussed the various levels in more depth than we've gone into here, and show people why it's possible because they are a soul that they can make that connection. So basically just laying the groundwork, that first module.
Module 2, understanding your innate oneness in the limitless realms of the soul's journey to access new possibilities for your life.
Yes, Stephen. In this module, we focus on a practice called self-inquiry. And that is when we take a deep dive into understanding who am I by asking the kinds of questions that most humans don't. And when you really drill down under the layers of being human, you discover this shared reality. And it's from there that we meet everyone. So it's really critical in this second module to ask those deep questions. And I can't see everybody's face when I'm teaching, but I know that a lot of them at first are like, well, I've never thought of life this way. But we really get you thinking outside the box. And once you're outside that box, all bets are off.
Module 3, make sacred connections with departed loved ones and pets through signs and verifiable evidence.
Sure. In this one, I go a little bit off to the side. It's much more about just talking with loved ones and pets. We dive into evidence, and I talk about not just the evidence that those across the veil have given us, but we look at the research that shows that the greater reality is very much real. So I'm going to talk about some of that research. We're going to talk about how those across the veil make their presence known, and we'll dive into even automatic writing, the practice where we can sit and have conversations with our loved ones who have passed, and even with our pets. Because it's interesting, Stephen, that your pets will come through talking to you in English language or whatever language is your native language. Once they've passed, they're just transferring information telepathically, but it comes through like a conversation, and we can learn to write those down.
That's so cool. That's really exciting. Module 4 is called Using the Flowing State of Human Energy Fields to Connect Others' Loved Ones and Famous People.
Yes, in this section, I'm going to show a video that I made from a download I got from across the veil. A really powerful video about the matrix, this field that we're part of, that is actually nested fields upon fields. So we're going to dive into what is a field. Each one of us, we know what the aura is. That is a field, like a whirlpool of information. And I show that once you understand that these are all swirling eddies that merge and flow, then you understand the dance that's going on. So we're going to dive into eddies, whirlpools, and fields upon fields.
Module 5, adopt the optimal brainwave state and best practices for conducting mediumship readings.
Yes, and here's we're getting into that left brain analytical, looking at how does the brain help us in a reading and how does it get in the way. And when you understand that the brain changes with the way we're thinking, we learn why it's important to slow down our brainwave patterns to connect across the veil. And so I will take participants through how to get into those states, and I'll teach 2 specific breathing patterns that allow us to get into the optimal state more easily.
Module 6, clear blocks in your energy field to access angelic realms and achieve greater clarity in mediumship.
And those blocks would be addressing the dense energy in us that comes from being human. There's not a single one of us that isn't walking wounded. My guide Brenda across the veil said, you can see the scars from up here, but the ones you work on, they look like glowworms. So we're going to look at how we can let our light shine through no matter what we've been through in our human life. And so I'm going to teach practices that I've gotten actually from the angelic realms, including one 7-step process for really allowing ourselves to look at old wounds and clear them. You can see how practices in mediumship actually benefit us in our day-to-day life.
So that's a fascinating image with the glowworms to picture our wounds in our energy bodies. That's very interesting. So module 7, reaching optimal soul-to-soul communication to channel masters and connect with the highest realms without systems or ritual.
Yes, and this one, of course, we're going to be talking about connecting with those higher realms, but there's in each module, Stephen, even though we focus on a different level, there's underlying teaching that will apply to every level. So in this one, I'm going to be talking about the importance of intention and also surrendering. Many people think that it's weak to surrender, but when we trust the process and we simply surrender to whatever comes up in a reading, we're actually able to tune into the higher realms.
And finally, module 8, attract synchronicities, abundance, and love when you make mediumship your way of life.
Yes, indeed. In this final module, I'm going to make sure that by this point, everybody truly understands the difference between the smaller self, that's us at the human level, and the higher self with a capital S. So basically those foundations that we started with have built and built and built until now at the end, people will be making better connections because we're coming from that higher self.
Well, what a great program. And there's a reason why this was the best-selling program we've ever launched before. And then I know it's going to even be better in this 2.0 version with you and your upgraded self as well. So again, you can find all the details at soulmediumshipcourse.com, soulmediumshipcourse.com. And so in addition to those 8 90-minute live sessions, those are going to be sessions that you have time to do interactive exercises, meditations. You can ask your questions live, super valuable. You also get recordings of every session, both video and audio, as well as word-for-word transcripts that you can go back, work with, study, and highlight. I think that's particularly valuable as you're building a skill that you can reinforce it and go back and re-watch things and reread them so that you can really integrate it in your life. There'll be weekly exercises you can do at home. There's a Facebook community to support you and deepen your experience. And it's also a great way to build community with like-minded people around the world who really, there's a thriving thing that happens when people are going through a shared transformational process together and a journey, and it really creates a bond. There'll also be some small group time to connect with other participants. And you'll see on the page at soulmediumshipcourse.com, there's also a few extra bonuses that are really there to enhance your journey. There's a video dialogue with Suzanne and Marie Manucheri, who's also a Shift faculty member. It's called What Souls Experience Right After Death. That's particularly an area a lot of people are curious about. You want to share a little bit what you and Marie were covering in that video?
Well, I love that the two of us were so in sync in that conversation, that my experiences and hers absolutely jive, and that there are various levels that we go through across the veil. There's growth that continues for the soul even after the human experience. So it was a very invigorating and affirming conversation that I hope that people will enjoy.
And that's just one bonus. There's also an exclusive savings code on HemiSync mediumship products You want to share a little bit about why those are so valuable when you're developing your mediumship skills?
Yes, and this is a difference from the first time we did this course, that I realized that part of my training from day one was when I started listening to meditation music with the binaural beats embedded in it, that it's like training wheels for meditation, Steve, and it allows us to achieve a whole brain state much easier and hold the focus that helps in mediumship. So I actually have 6 hemisync recordings that are my own that are perfect for mediumship, and I'm asking participants this time to use at least one of those recordings because we're having really good results from those who do use them. Even if they've been meditating for years, we're getting a lot of wows from people. So the Hemisync company has generously offered a discount for anybody in the course to use on those.
That's a great extra bonus. And on the page, there is one extra bonus that I want to showcase as well, which is particularly intriguing. This is a special bonus you get when you sign up by midnight tonight Pacific time. This gives you a little extra encouragement to go to the page now or after this call and tune in. And if you're getting a yes to move forward, you're going to get a special bonus called Who Am I? A Channeled Meditation. There's a video with Suzanne and her guides. And want to share more about that special bonus they get today?
The greatest question we can ask, according to my guides of spirit, is, who am I? And if you're new on this path, you'll say, well, I know I'm Suzanne, or I'm Stephen, or I'm a human, but we're so much more than that. And this meditation came about when I was leading a large group, and I've learned to surrender and let my guides lead the meditation. And it's just a really powerful experience that takes us to a knowing that I am so much more than this body.
Well, that's a great extra reason to sign up today. And yeah, so much wisdom pours through you, Suzanne. It's really, really a blessing to be with you. So we've kept this the investment on this program very accessible, even with the 8 modules and the extra bonuses. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you save 10% when you pay in full with 1 payment of $349. The course is going to start December 6th and run Wednesdays at 9 Pacific, noon Eastern. But even if you can't make those live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings and the transcripts and the community and particularly the practices. Because really at the heart of this is, as you make that commitment, as Suzanne talked about, and you really do the daily practices and open these portals, like the testimonial letter that she read, it's like whole worlds can open up that really change your life for the better. So again, you can go and get all the information at soulmediumshipcourse.com. And there's also a lot of other testimonials from people whose lives have been changed. And by working with Suzanne, people say what I've begun experiencing is miraculous. I lost my wife last year, suddenly started this journey through this amazing and spiritually enlightened content, tools, resources. I've not only advanced my journey, but I've also opened my mind to a life of reconnection with the conscious universe. So much deep praise. So there's really great testimonials around the ways people have their life has blossomed, the relationships reestablished, and the connections really with higher sources of wisdom for guiding us through life. So it's a very it's a course that can have a broad impact on healing relationships, connecting with guides, even connecting with angels. It really gives you a core set of skills to grow your consciousness and advance the healing of our world. So again, you can find all the details at soulmediumshipcourse.com, soulmediumshipcourse.com. So Suzanne, we still have a few minutes left. Anything that's still on your heart that we haven't shared yet today, and especially for folks who are considering going deeper in this path with you?
Just listening to you there, Stephen, I just think about how my life was before I opened up to the awareness that the spirit world is right here, always accessible to us, how I was then and how I am now. And I just can't imagine going through life without realizing that I'm not alone. And I feel sorry for those who don't realize that. And I love that we now have the opportunity to share that with more and more people. And I want people to know that my life is not perfect, but the point is, life will always have its ups and downs, but when you develop a conscious relationship with sentient beings across the veil who have that higher perspective, who love you, who cherish you, who want to work with you, but they need you to reach out to them. We need to give them our energy. It is a reciprocal dance. When you develop those relationships, your life changes. And when the challenges come, you're not in it alone. You have these beings holding you up, and it's not just placating words that I'm sharing with you here. This is reality, and it is a beautiful, joyous reality. And I'm just so excited and grateful that the Shift Network allows me this chance to share that with many more people. So thank you, Stephen.
Well, we are blessed to work with you. I know I just like see everybody who develops mediumship skills and capacities is just beginning to touch not only their lives, but touch other people's lives, and the ripples go out for all the generations to come. So this is really a great blessing to host this work and to produce it with you. And I know that whoever chooses to join you is going to just get so much quality information. You're very straightforward, just telling the facts, sharing your experiences, and giving the practices that really can change lives. That you are just really so clear and so grounded, and such a great blessing for all of us.
Well, thank you. I like to try to put things in as simple language as possible. And I know I've had many students that say, I've been studying this stuff for years and I finally get it. That's one point. And then another final point, as I was reviewing the modules again and again and refining them and upgrading them, there are certain videos that I had forgotten about that I get to share in the class. And I get so excited, like, oh, I get to watch that again and watch everybody's reaction as they see it, because it just takes away all doubt that this is not any doubt that the greater reality is here. They're fun, they're fascinating, they're wondrous, and you can just feel it in the participants, Stephen, that they leave and they know this is real, and they have a community now that they can share it with. So it's just wonderful.
It is just wonderful. Well, thank you, Suzanne, for sharing this time together. And thank you all for coming here today and investing your time. I hope you've found it as enlightening as I've found it. And if you want to go further, you can do so at Expand Your Innate Mediumship Skills with Soul to Soul Communication at soulmediumshipcourse.com. And you'll get that special bonus with Suzanne when you sign up by midnight tonight, which is Who Am I? A channeled meditation with Suzanne and her guides. So thank you so much, Suzanne, and many blessings all. you.